Sean, you are someone who's had an incredible career so far, from the Entrepreneurs Organization, then YPO, and now your new venture, Capital54. Where did the entrepreneurial spirit come from? Did you have a lemonade stand as a kid, a paper route? Where did it come from?
So, Chris, thanks firstly for having me. And, you know, both my parents were very entrepreneurial. So I grew up in a household where, hard work, fending for themselves sort of was an example I grew up with. But my own, I think, started, I was a swimmer. And the high school I went to didn't have its own pool. We had to go to the community pool. So we used to trudge, up the hill and go to the community pool, and we had to share it with anybody else that was there. We had kind of two lanes. And the committee of the school decided to build a pool, but we had to do a fundraiser. And because I was so passionate about swimming, I got very fired up about going door to door and literally raising money. I think my tally was about $10,000. This is in South Africa, so Rand equivalent. And, I was very successful at it. I literally go door to door after school, sometimes sort of twilight, dodge the barking dogs, and I had my little pitch. And it seemed to come naturally to me. So that was my sort of first sales experience. And then seeing the swimming pool being built in my final year at high school, my team won the cup, my house team, and I collected, and there was a sense of pride. And then I happened to work for one of South Africa's foremost entrepreneurs, a fellow by the name of Robert Maingard, who really enhanced that passion for being an entrepreneur. And that's what sort of spurred me to start my own business at the age of 25 and a half, nearly 26. So I come at it honestly, Chris, I think. Yeah. I hope.
well, that's incredible. And I think that those door-to-door, I'm sure you refined your pitch, and you probably accepted rejection, got used to it. And
got bitten by a Doberman Pinscher once, and that was my biggest sale.
Oh, jeez.
To give me 500 because I had no blood coming out of my jeans. It wasn't a bad bite. I didn't need stitches or anything, but she was so horrified. I'll never forget it. So, creating that sense of, I've got to help you was very important lesson.
Wow, that's such an interesting story. That's incredible. So
your audience on the personal injury side may have advised me to take a different approach, but I got my payment. Let's put it that way.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fun. That's such a good story. So, you started your first business, and, to be a member of EO, you have to hit $1 million in sales. So it's that minimum requirement. And you did that with your company early on. So tell us, that story of hitting that first landmark $1 million in sales.
Yeah, that was, fortunately for me, and I'm extraordinarily blessed. I was in Canada, and I was selling a suite of psychometric aptitude, math, reasoning. And I happened to secure some really good benchmark accounts early on. Companies like Kaminko Metals, Kelly Services, which was a big temporary placement company, and several others, Standard Life and some big life insurance companies. And what I learned early is those marquee accounts, I was able to increase my revenue there fairly substantially and charge a higher price than a lot of my competitors. And my model then became going after the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, and that helped my acceleration. So I didn't have to sell a lot of business because I sold what is commonly called now an enterprise level model, and that helped me get within 2.5 years up to that level. And I didn't know about EO. I'd never volunteered for anything. I'd never been part of a community organization. And Peter Thomas, who was the founder of Century 21, recruited me into EO. He was a YPO member, chairman emeritus of EO, just a superb human being. And he really shared the benefit of learning from a peer group, being with other entrepreneurs, other business owners, and taking advantage of that. But part of it was giving back. We had a volunteer to run EO. And when I joined EO, there were about 400 members worldwide. They're now over 15,000. And, each of us early members had a role to play in developing our chapter and getting speakers and resources and working collaboratively together in small groups. And that gave me a very, very important step up, because I was able to figure out through watching others who'd made mistakes that I didn't need to make, and for having very sort of candid, confidential, honest discussions about how to fund a business, how to scale the business. It was a great experience, and I've never looked back from that time. There's a saying that we go through life. We don't go through life alone. Least of all, my experience has been that surrounding myself with people that are prepared to give and share their experiences was a massive help, is a massive help, because I'm still getting that kind of support today. And it created for me, Chris, I think a personal dedication to helping others wherever I can. Obviously not, I don't spend all my time, because one has to make payroll and pay the bills and, be a great husband and father and friend. But, leveraging the EO type community and then subsequently YPO was phenomenal.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. So when I have a history education degree, and somehow I became an entrepreneur, started my own business, and I joined Vistage. And, while
Great.
I experienced I got immersed in this, with other business owners, and I got to see how they were accepting challenges and dealing with employees or growing. And so it was very powerful for me. And so I completely agree. And you get to work with your peers and you have those relationships. And, from years, you went on then to YPO, it was formerly the Young Presidents Association.
Organization, YPO, Young Presidents Org. Yeah.
Yeah. And you became the global president of YPO, so, and it's one of the most powerful groups in the world. So why do you think YPO is one of the most powerful groups in the world?
I think it goes back to what I was sharing earlier. 70 years it's been in business. Its uniqueness is I call it the trust formula. I think, and Vistage is probably the same. I haven't belonged to Vistage, but I know a lot of Vistage chairs and people that have been in Vistage, and several of my team at YPO, we would put through Vistage because it was very valuable for them operationally. But I think trust and this concept of authentic, non-judgmental sharing with each other. So, the whole concept of a peer. Now, YPO is very broad, so it's any business imaginable, and I think it's when you have that kind of candid, trust-based relationship where you kind of take your mask off. I was experienced early on. We layer masks on ourselves in order to compete, in order to, and a lot of it's made up in our minds because there's whatever insecurities and fear factors. We think we need to operate a certain way. And so we build these masks. One of the things YPO does in a very sort of confidential setting, it enables you to take those masks off and really, when you're share the facts, share the personal impact, share the concerns or the insecurities. And when you don't get any criticism coming back at you or judgment, you develop a confidence that enables you to move forward, to learn, to grow, to adapt. And I think that's part of its secret sauce. YPO has a concept called forum, and they're called masterminds or different things, that exist out there that are small group, curated sort of coaching. Coaches do a great job at this. But the element of trust in those is really what makes them work. And then if you are truly prepared to divulge, to discuss, to share some of the challenges that you have, and when you get feedback and you get other people sharing from experience. And the key here is sharing from experience. It's not giving advice, as you know, Chris. It's really sharing your own experience, because in your own experience, chances are you will have a direct impact on the person receiving that story, that experience, and they can take from that, the nuggets that can help them be, that they can use in their own situation. I'll give you an example, and it's more of a personal one. When my mom was diagnosed with motor neuron disease, Lou Gehrig's they call it here, it was obviously a major shock to the family, to myself. None of us had ever had experience with it. But I shared that with my forum group, and one of the members of my forum had a relative who'd gone through it, and they were able to put me in touch with the Motor Neuron Society here in the United States. And within 24 hours, my mom had a nurse at her door, and for the 6 months of her life that remained with her, she was able to be cared for in a manner which I probably would have found it, but it could have taken a couple of months, but this was a way to get, it provided me the kind of help and confidence and, solution that was really powerful. And I have 1,000 stories like that, personal and through observation. This is where community groups today, I think the ecosystems of these are profound, and they're growing. That's why I've invested through Capital54 in a new venture called Collective54, which is a kind of like a YPO, but very deep for owners of professional services firms. Because that's a unique demographic. It's your demographic. It's the owners and the entrepreneurs that are your audience. And where do you go, to get, help to grow your business, to scale? And how do you create an exit for you so that you create generational wealth for yourself, your family, whether you want to, buy a boat or whether you want to give it away to a worthy cause? It's, how do you create a community around helping you and helping each other get there? Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, I love that story. I love those stories, and I think the big part of being connected to individuals and access to connections, that was incredible, and helping you deal with that situation with your mother. And the other thing that I was just interested in, and I want to jump right into Capital54 after this, is you spent a ton, being the president, being the CEO of this organization, you spent a ton of time with entrepreneurs, and you saw many, many CEOs, the CEOs that were successful, the ones that weren't successful, maybe that ruminated or didn't take it to the next level. So in your, what made the successful CEO, stand out, and or what makes a great CEO in your mind?
There's so many different varieties. So it's not a silver bullet answer, because it's very nuanced. I would say some common characteristics, curiosity and learning as an underpinning of successful CEOs. I don't think you can run a business today, whether it's a small business or a medium or even a large size business, unless you are developing and unless you have the curiosity to learn and grow and understand people and markets and, products. So that quintessential, I call it curiosity, YPO and EO and Vistage and all of those. I think people that join those organizations join because they have a natural curiosity to learn and grow. And so that's a good underpinning, I think, as a characteristic. Principles, I think today, if you've got a purpose and principle, I love Ray Dalio, for example, and that's kind of why
Great book
popped into my mind. But, having a North Star in whatever business you're in, that's not only representative of you as a leader, because you have to be able to walk the talk, but having a North Star that's attractive to yourself and people that work for you. Now, you have to, when I say walk the talk, being authentic and being able to be measured on your accomplishments and on doing what you say you're going to do are very important ingredients. And then I think it's, dependent on, I don't think there's one leadership style. Each of us have a different composition of personality, life experiences, worldviews. But if you're leading, leaders really take on the responsibility and the accountability to their stakeholders, if they're running publicly traded companies, to their stockholders, but most importantly to themselves. So that's important. I think courage and authenticity, courage to take a risk, to get out there and make a payroll, hire a group of people, pioneer, create impact. Because there's so many interesting businesses today. They're wonderful NGOs, non-profits. Being in business, to me, the entrepreneurship aspect of it means that, you're creating something worthwhile, whether it's a product or a service or widget. There's an exchange, but you're also perpetuating the ability for people to live and, do things that they require. There's a monetary aspect to it. And then finally, I think extending leaders who extend themselves, who are prepared to make mistakes, who have compassion for others, not apple pie compassion, but true, genuine compassion to understand, what it takes to, to get up in the morning and do the best one can. I think are the core ingredients, and there are others too. I mean, I have my own sort of core pillars. I have 6 sort of core, what I call my own personal pillars. Communication, powerful communication is key for me, and part of that is candid and truthful communication. I try and be positive because today, positivity is really important in the face of the difficulties that we're all facing. Reputation, so reputation for fair dealing. You can deal hard, which I think is appropriate in business, but fair dealing. And then passion. I think without passion, why are you even bothering? Which is important. Vision. Leaders without vision, who can think uniquely and push the envelope and explore the realms of possibility are key. I mentioned courage, and then action. I think words without action are just that, they're words. And so verifiable action, those are the sort of the 6 things that I try and live up to every day. And it's a challenge. Nobody's perfect.
That's such an incredible answer, well-rounded answer to such a broad question that I asked. And I'm so glad that I asked it, because that is incredible. And I 100% agree with all of those. Even the statement at the end, the entrepreneurs versus the entrepreneurs. A lot of people. So let's jump right into Capital54.
Yes.
Because many individuals have great ideas for companies, but what does Capital54 do to help turn those great ideas into successful businesses?
So Capital54 is the family office of a fellow YPO, my business partner, my boss, Greg Alexander, who is just one of those extraordinarily gifted, talented entrepreneurs who had his own boutique consulting firm called SBI, had a very successful sale several years ago. And he approached me. He wants to invest in boutique professional services firms and in entrepreneurs who are wanting to make an impact, particularly in our industry. So if you think of the NAICS code for professional services firms is 54. That's where the name comes from, Capital54. So our goal is to make strategic investments in entrepreneurs that are in the growth phase of their businesses. And in order to do that, our first portfolio company, which we've taken 1.5 years to put together, we've built all the intellectual property. And it's a membership group for owners of professional services firms in 3 specific tiers. Those companies and owners that are going through growth, so they're small, they've got a handful of clients, they've got their first team put together, but they need business development. They need to get out of survival mode. They need other individuals who've been there and done that can help them on that journey. And so that they're not alone. First-time entrepreneurs, it's very difficult. There's something called the imposter syndrome. Am I really capable of doing this? Am I going to succeed? Am I going to fail? So that tier is very important. And then we've focused as well on the scale aspect. So people that are They passed the growth phase, they're in scale phase, but they're working 80 hours a week. They're working too hard in their business. They're typically the rainmaker owner, partner. And how do we help them spend less time on the day-to-day, more time in strategy? So that's about making sure you've got the right people around you, the right senior team, maybe bringing in a partner, maybe expanding, your reach through some kind of a merger or ecosystem partnership. And that is a very, very important group, because 95% of owners don't get past that scale group to enterprise value. And that's the other piece. So, the third aspect of what we're doing is those people that are 2 to 3 or 4 years away from selling. How do you make sure that their organizations and that they're prepared to be super attractive to a strategic buyer or a private equity buyer? And there are a lot of little things that they have to do. They have to separate, for example, their personal finances from the business finances. So many entrepreneurs, their lives are wrapped up into their business, but come the day they need to sell their business, it has to be pristine from a financial standpoint. Fee quality has to be great. A good monthly recurring revenue model needs to be in place. And it's even small professional services businesses like boutique law firms or accounting firms. If they truly want to create, an exit, a substantial exit, maybe it's a roll-up that they consider. Maybe there's some intellectual property that they can digitize that becomes their unique IP that has a value in excess of, their fee-based value. So there are all those little nuances that I've been in professional services for 30 years, and Greg's been in that business around the same, a little bit less than me. But we want to take our experiences, our successes, and pay it forward. Now, selfishly, and one of my principles is candor. By creating Capital54, we want to be able to find those owners of businesses whose values and whose business resonates with us. And we're putting our own money into those companies to help them grow. So that's the purpose of Capital54. We are going to do a couple more startups that we're looking at right now. And our long-term plan is to go side by side with some really gifted owners and help them have the kind of success that Greg and myself have had. So that's the game plan. And we're patient. This is both of us are in the middle phase of our life. And so we're at a phase where hopefully, with our perspective, our networks, our, willingness to sit and spend time with entrepreneurs will, accrue positively to both us and the people that we invest with.
Absolutely. And I think, and I appreciate your candor. Right. It's the rising tides effect, because if you can take a business and substantially grow it and take those individual stresses off that owner and make them into positives, whether it's hiring the right team or access to capital or network or whatever it is, I think that is, and from your experience, then candidly, I think that you should benefit from that.
Yes.
And
that's what I think the world benefits.
Absolutely.
I'm a capitalist, unabashedly. I'm also a humanist. I feel my own personal freedoms are very important for me to own and take control of, and not somebody else. I want to work in an environment where there are rules and there are frameworks and there's good access to legal frameworks that protect me. But I want to be the master of my own destiny, and I would love to help as many entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs as possible achieve their own impact, whatever that dream may be, right? Because each of us have our own desires and dreams.
That's amazing. And so, most of our audience is personal injury attorneys, and there tends to be a big wedge between taking their firm to the next level. It seems like there's some stagnation. Some of the firms really get it. But I kind of wanted to focus and just get, a quick hitter on a few things. On the first one, in the personal injury vertical, what should attorneys be doing to improve their networking?
So great question, Chris. They need to dedicate time, to the process. I think one of the big observations that we've had is professionalizing your outreach and your business development process is not a hit and miss. It's not something that just via osmosis or your innate ability to network individually. There are some phenomenal digital marketing businesses, for example, today that leverage, platforms like LinkedIn. But, and I say that and everybody goes, yeah, well, we know that and, these other things. But there is a way to go about marketing in a very specific way to your target audience. So firstly, it's understanding your customer, understanding what drives them, what the needs are, where you're getting referrals. And then making sure that you develop the kinds of relationships and touch points with those groups through communities like that. So social media marketing is very important today. Not ignoring the face-to-face. Unfortunately, in this pandemic, it's very difficult to get out and about, and a lot of people are resistant to that. But it's building in those touch points that create a trusted relationship and you're top of mind going out. So that's an element. Joining organizations like Capital54, for example, very important because, or associations, where you are leveraging into a multiplication effect through that network, and that's very important because then people have your back. I was a member of a group called the Dallas Round Table for many years. They get together every Tuesday morning and they share leads and needs. And there are groups specifically that are good for doing that. But having a strategy, measurement on a daily basis, because this is your lifeblood, having some really good tools to monitor and make sure that your follow-ups and your touch points are automated. We use, and this is not I'm a huge Salesforce fan, but I also like HubSpot and these other tools, which are relatively inexpensive, but they take a lot of the administrivia off your plate. And if you utilize them well, they can be very effective. Then there are a whole group of organizations that you can outsource to today. As a small, personal injury attorney, if you've got, the ability to dedicate some financial resource on a monthly basis to an outsourced group of people. There are some fantastic companies. One in particular that I've been using out of Atlanta, Georgia, called Uproar. They're spectacular. These folk go out and, you give them a defined list of target, and they'll go out and they'll actually book appointments for you. So you can have the face-to-face. You can have that conversation with somebody that needs your services or that is a good referral source for you. So I think some of those, tactics are useful. It is important to work your plan to make sure that you're constantly prepared to pivot. But you've got to have a really nice top pipeline that can come through the funnel. And that's got to be, unfortunately, and even for a small business, if you're not doing that effectively, then it's feast or famine. You're going from one deal, you're having to come, to then bounce back and fill your pipeline of relationships. So you can automate some of that. That's a way to scale and grow quite nicely, and you can manage it there. You can put the pedal down and accelerate. You can pull it back. You can hire probably. These are the things, by the way, that on a weekly basis we teach our members at Capital54, and we have a whole series of templates. So, but that's just top of mind right now, Chris.
Yeah, and I love the multiplier effect that you're talking about with the networking and definitely with Capital54 for our audience listening. We're definitely going to link that up, have so that you can get the help there. And another little area for personal injury attorneys, particularly small personal injury law firms, they get in these situations where maybe they're going to litigate a case and it just drains their money, their funds, or they need a cash injection. So how should they go about in prospecting potential investors? Does it just come back to networking?
No, I think there's a very specific strategy to adopt there. One is there are firms now, sort of private equity models that provide litigation support depending on the case. That's a burgeoning industry, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about these. But I think, I have a really dear friend of mine, John Garder, who is a managing partner of a very large firm, K&L Gates, that's gone out and put together a pool of capital to do exactly what you just asked for. So there are pockets like that. It is important in this, I'm sure for your clients, you've got to have forward, if capital is there, you've got to save enough, and you've got to have your pool set aside for just that eventuality. And that's in that business, I'm assuming, and I don't know it well, so I apologize, but I would be building as part of my capitalization strategy, a pool to take care of exactly that type of eventuality. Now, if you're going from deal to deal, it may be very difficult to do that. So lining up with a capital source may be good. But, again, I think defining what that looks like, getting ready for it, maybe aligning with some of the bigger firms that would support them in doing a fee split or a gain share type model could work as well. So again, I think it's important that your listeners think through, identify what those potential challenges would be, and then crowdsource solutions through networking, through outreach to firms that are specifically designed for that type of contribution.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a very well-rounded answer, and I think that you covered it much better than I've heard. I think some of the stories, and I've interviewed a lot of personal injury attorneys, the thing that I hear is they just load up the credit card and, accrue all this debt. But I think kind of forecasting maybe those financial needs is incredibly important, particularly when that just perfect case lands on your plate. And, but, even then, there are some firms that may be able you may be able to partner with that can actually, help try the case with you and extend the value because they're experts in that particular area, where you might try the case and not get very much. And so I think there's some opportunities there for collaboration too.
I do too. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. And, I think, when people get dollars in their eyes and they think this case is going to be that groundbreaking wealth creation event, sometimes greed gets in the way in place of, really thoughtful, how do I extend my ability to be in business for a while? If you're not a one-trick pony and you're thinking long-term, it's what sorts of relationships will help me along the way, because there are peaks and valleys in every business. We're seeing that right now. Some businesses are doing extraordinarily well today. Others, like the hospitality industry or the meeting and event planning industry, are really hurting, but they'll come back. And it's, are they ready for those eventualities? Nobody's ever been through anything like this today.
Right.
And so I think the big lesson that I'm taking away from this, the last 6 months and maybe the next 6 months, is how do we get ready to handle these types, and they may not be as big a crisis, but how do we plan for different scenarios coming up? And what you're talking about is really a scenario planning mentality to deal with certain events in your business. And are you ready for them? Do you have the relationships in place that you can go to help you get through them? And thinking about them, taking the time to plan, to strategize, to work with others. How have you dealt with this in the past? Who have you managed to go to that would share and not try and take the lion's share of the revenue from a particular case? Maybe a way to go about thinking about it.
I love that, and it immediately makes me think of niching.
Niching. The
big,
riches are in the niches, is what my partner Greg tells me.
Right. The riches are in the niches, and the big con, there's so many pros to niching. You're a thought leader, you're an expert, you stand out in a crowded space. I could go on and on about the benefits of efficiency for operations and you're maximizing your marketing spend. And the con that a lot of times people list is, it's smaller market cap and it's risk to an industry downturn, right? So a lot of people won't niche because they're just afraid that maybe they picked the wrong industry and it goes, they pick hospitality. But I think what you mentioned is being aware that you have an extreme focus and planning for that potential, like what if at the very beginning.
Yes. And the reality is, it's a specialized world today. We're not, it's highly disruptive, and a lot of big organizations, mid-sized organizations, they don't know what, if they don't have the talent in-house, where do they go? So if you have a niche speciality, if you have certain intellectual property, you can make that very worthwhile to your clients. We're working with so many interesting member companies right now, Chris. Counterintuitively, you would think that retail is getting hammered today. Some of our retail consulting members are 40–50% up on their revenues over last year, because they're helping in bankruptcy, they're helping in inventory, they're helping in logistics, supply chain. And it's, when companies are faced with calamity and a massive reduction in revenue, where do they go for help? And this is where the niche players who've developed a specialty will always play a role. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that every day. It's remarkable. But it's having the mindset not to put yourself in a backward-looking position, and you need to be prepared at any given point in time, to be able to toot your own horn and say, this is where I specialize. Here are my credentials. Here are my artifacts of professionalism. This is what I've done, and give me a chance to do this for you. Now, again, going back to what we talked about very earlier, you've got to be able to credibly walk your talk and deliver that value. But if you've got a proven track record and you feel confident, and you can evidence your ability to provide value, you'll always be able to get business, in my view.
I completely agree. And I completely agree in all aspects of that. And it's so interesting to see kind of what's occurring. And I just think it's now in many industries, it's just so saturated, and it's important to stand out. And one way to stand out is to specialize and to be the expert in that niche. And Sean, I kind of wanted to shift over to personal here. So you have such a history from EO to YPO to Capital54 to Collective54, and you're clearly the epitome of an entrepreneur and a busy person. So how important is it for you to take time off, and what are you doing to kind of decompress?
So firstly, I'll use a phrase. It's a well-tried phrase. Life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So, that is kind of like a red flag to a bull for an entrepreneur, because we all, let's just put 80 hours a week into things. Unless you're physically and mentally healthy, you won't be successful long term. You may be able to, push it through for a couple of years. But I have found, that balancing, I try not to take work home. I've hated being home during COVID. Not that I'm anti-work from home. I think that the outsourced and the work from home model is here to stay, and it's fantastic, right? But I've tried to separate throughout my life, the time I dedicate to work and the time I dedicate to refresh. Dan Sullivan, who owns a business called The Strategic Coach, who you may or may not know about, I was in his program many years ago, 25, 26 years ago, when he first started out, maybe even 30 years ago now. And he has something called focus days, free days, and buffer days. And it was really difficult for me initially to get my head around, what does it mean to take a totally free day? And so I try and have my weekends, to the extent I can, be totally free of work. Now, there may be client calls, relationships. At YPO, it was a 7-day week, because we had member clusters in 130 different countries, all different types of religions, all different types of time zones. So you've got to balance that. I literally try and organize my week and my life so that I've got pockets of free time. Buffer time to do administrivia, because today it's important that everything is ticked and tied from an administration standpoint. And then when you're really on, be really on. But that, for me, by the way, personally, that requires getting at least 8 hours sleep. And I don't respond well if I'm not rested. And there are little hacks that one can use that I've developed personally over time to make sure that happens. family is very important to me. So time with my wife and daughter is key, and that's why weekends are, are pretty much off limits. But the reality is, as an entrepreneur, we do what it takes, to get things done. And so not ignoring your physical and mental well-being is dangerous, or ignoring it is dangerous. And having, again, a structure, some kind of structure that helps you just disconnect. Time with friends, socializing, exercising, I think is vitally important. And you don't have to overdo it in my view, but it's got to be part and parcel. For me personally, it's part and parcel of what I try and do every day.
The word that's resonating with me is balance. And one of the things that's been a struggle for me personally is I like, even though I have a remote company, I like to separate work and home life. And it's like, well, my living room's over my left shoulder. So I always feel like I'm at work. I exit the room and I'm still at the office. So it's kind of like a mental shift that's been hard to adjust and to kind of decompress. And yeah, so it's just balance. And I completely agree. And, as we close up, we have a new segment called our 3 for 3. Yes. It's a quick fire round, three questions in 3 minutes. So just kind of,
Chris, the pressure's on. I have to
Here we go. Hey, which entrepreneur do you admire the most?
Wow. Which entrepreneur do I admire the most? There's so many. I would say classic in the financial space would be Warren Buffett. And I would say Bill Gates for his total sustaining. I mean, he's just a rock star, and just, he's a marathon guy. I'm extraordinarily amazed by what he's done. But then there's some entrepreneurs that nobody's heard about. And I know you asked me for only one. But, I've got some really good EO and YPO friends who I just, people like Rand Stagen and Rick Sapio, who I just so admire and who epitomize true entrepreneurship, but you wouldn't know who they were because they're not, they're not the Gateses or the Buffetts of the world.
Well, that's perfect. And we'll have to give them a shout out. They'll love this. And the next question, being a search engine optimization company, I got to ask this to every guest. What is your top search engine optimization tip?
That is such a hard
question. Softball was thrown up there.
Softball was thrown up there. Target. Don't flood it, very targeted. Try and be as specific as you can.
Perfect. And then final question here. What is the next thing on your bucket list?
I want to travel again. My wife, daughter, and I we had a trip planned in August, our first river cruise in Europe, and we were going to go down the Rhine, and we were so looking forward to that. My daughter's 17, got 2 more years high school left. So I'm looking forward for the world to come back and, to do that trip next year. I'm really looking forward to that. So that's the bucket list.
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, you have to take lots of pictures and put them on Instagram. But Sean, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
And Chris, just let me know if I can do anything for you and your listeners. I mean that sincerely. You have a wonderful manner about you, and I really enjoyed this time together.
Awesome. I did as well. Thank you so much, Sean.
All the best.